Okay, so welcome back, and now what we're going to do is we're going to do a graph of a lemniscate. And so we're going to do this one here. So a couple things we need to do. Hold on. What we need to do is go through our steps and know how this behaves. Okay, so first of all, notice that it's cosine, so this is going to be symmetric with respect to the polar axis. Okay. Also, we know that this is going to be symmetric with the pole, and also the line theta equals pi over 2. Now, if we want to graph this thing, we can go through the steps, and let's look at this angle here. So if we look at this angle here, this is 2 theta, so we know that since this is symmetric with respect to the pole, with respect to the polar axis, and with respect to theta equal to pi over 2, we can use that symmetry to help us to graph this. So let's look at this. This is the angle U. And so we know how this behaves in the first quadrant. So we know for cosine, it starts at 1, and it goes down to 0, and then it goes down to -1, and then back up to 0, and so on. Okay, so we understand the behavior of cosine. So we know that for this here, cosine will either be positive or negative, right? It oscillates between 1 and -1. Now the thing is that we're dealing with r squared here. Okay, so you've got to be careful with the values that you get out of cosine, because if cosine is negative, then we can't take the square root of a negative number, because then we get a complex number, we get an imaginary number, we can't graph that. So that's not graphed on here, because this is only for real valued angles. Okay? We'll deal with complex numbers in the next section. But for right now, we can only graph things that are positive. And cosine is only positive in the first quadrant or the second quadrant. Okay? So now, that means that we need to go from, so this angle U is going to have to be less than or equal to pi over 2 and greater than or equal to 0, right? And also, U can be here, right? If we go from, what? 3 pi over 2, right? To 2 pi. Okay, which means for theta, right, because this is equal to 2 theta, right? So this means U, this is 2 theta, right? So if I just substitute in for 2 theta, what U is, then that means if I divide this by 2, that means theta has to be greater than or equal to 0 and less than or equal to pi over 4. And likewise, for here, let me do this. So that would say 3 pi over 4 is less than or equal to theta, which would be less than or equal to pi. Okay, now, so what we're going to do is we're going to take this. Okay, so let's focus on this range right here for theta. So now, what about 0? Right, so when is this 0? So again, so let's go through our steps. So we've got our range that we're thinking about. So let's think about the 0. So if we have 4 cosine 2 theta equal to 0, well, that's going to happen when cosine 2 theta is equal to 0. And cosine is equal to 0 when the angle 2 theta is what, right? Cosine of what angle is 0? Pi over 2, which means that theta would have to be pi over 4. So that means there's a 0 at 0 comma pi over 4. Okay. Now, what about the maximum value? Where does the maximum value occur? Well, the maximum value occurs when cosine of 2 theta is equal to 1, because then this will be 4, r squared will give us plus or minus 2. Okay? So if I do that, so that means what angle? So cosine of what angle equals 1? Well, we know that the cosine of 0 is 1. So that means theta equals 0. And when theta equals 0, r is equal to plus or minus 0.2. So that means at 0, we're going to get a point here and a point here because of the symmetry. And then also we have our 0 point here at pi over 4 at 45 degree angle, right? So that means, so here's what I'm going to do. So notice if I have a 45 degree angle, right? It goes all the way out here. And I have another 45 degree angle going this way. Like so. Then what is this telling me? Well, it tells me that I'm starting out at 3, or excuse me, at 2, right? So when this is 0, I'm going to have a positive, because again, I'm starting at 0, so it's going to be positive, and I'm going to go from positive 2, and by the time I get to 45 degrees, I'm going to be at 0. Oops. Like so. Now, what if I go from 3 pi over 4 to pi? Well, what's 3 pi over 4? Well, 3 pi over 4, if I plug in 3 pi over 4, I get 3 pi over 2. And the cosine of 3 pi over 2 is what? Well, plug 3 pi over 2 here, or excuse me, 3 pi over 4 here, that's going to give me 3 pi over 2. 3 pi over 2 oh, hold on a second. Oh, this is wrong. That's not 3 pi over, hold on, this is wrong. Oh, this should be 3 pi over, oh, no, that's right. We got 3 pi over 2, so yes, this would be 3 pi over 4. Yep, that's correct. So again, if this is 3 pi over 4, I'm going to get the 3 pi over 2, which will be this here. Okay, so at 3 pi over 4, so 3 pi over 4 is 45 degree angles here. So 3 pi over 4, so think about it. So this is pi over 4, 2 pi over 4, 3 pi over 4. So by the time I get to here at 3 pi over 4, which is 45 degree angle, I'm going to get oh, this is going to be negative. And so I can't have a negative number in there. Hold on a second. I know it should work out this way too. So 3 pi over 4 which is going to give me 3 pi over 2 which is going to give me 0. Yeah. So 3 pi over 2 will give me 0. So I'm going to start here at 3 pi over 2, it'll be 0. And then when I get to pi, so if I split pi in here, I'm going to get to 2 pi. And at 2 pi, cosine will be 1, which will bring me back to 4, which will bring me to square root of 2. So what will happen is here, I'm going to start at 0. And, oops, don't want to go past my line. So it's going to go like that. Now, the thing is if I go to here, in the second and third quadrant, right? So here's the thing. If I say theta from pi over 4 to pi, then what happens? Or 2 theta, rather. So if I go from the second quadrant, let's say I go into the second quadrant and I say, okay, I want the angle to go from pi over 2 to pi. And so if I divide both sides by 2, then I get theta goes from pi over 4 to pi over 2. Now, what happens here? So we're still in the first quadrant for theta. Now here, so what happens here? If I put in pi over 4, well, I know if I put in pi over 4, I'm going to get 0, right? So I'm going to be here. But what happens if I put in pi over 2? Well, that means I'm going to get pi. And the cosine of pi is -1, and I can't take the square root of a -1, right? Or a negative number, okay? So this is where we're going to use symmetry. So I know that this is a reflection of this, and I know it's going to do the same thing over on this side. So that's one way to graph it, okay, using symmetry. So the neat thing about this is we only need to graph the first quadrant, and then if we use symmetry, we know we're going to be able to reflect points across this way and across this way, okay? And once we do that, then we can just connect the dots and solve. Have a good day.